Welcome to episode 3 of Iconic Tone. Today we are dissecting the Billy Gibbons tone from the early 1970s era of ZZ Top. This was actually requested in a comment on the first Iconic Tone episode, and funnily enough, a couple of days after I saw that comment, I got an email from Face Distribution, who represent J Rocket Audio, asking if I would be able to make a video using their new El Hombre Overdrive pedal, which was literally designed to emulate the early 70s ZZ Top Billy Gibbons sound, and the name is of course a reference to their 1973 album Tres Hombres. So J Rocket are the sponsor of today's video. Their El Hombre Overdrive comes out today, and I'm going to break down my tone using this overdrive pedal plugged into my HX Stomp on the floor here later on in the video. But first, staying true to the format of the other Iconic Tone episodes, let's first talk about the gear that Billy Gibbons was using in the early 70s with ZZ Top. So in my research, I found something interesting on a thread on the Gear Page forum, where this guy said he had emailed the producer of the album, the Tres Hombres record, a guy called Robin Hood Baines, and he asked him what Billy Gibbons was using on those sessions, and this was his apparent response. He said, "Well, I can tell you from memory that Billy used Pearly and several Fender solid body guitars during those sessions. He played through a Marshall stack, and I used a Neumann U67 on that stack. Later on, they used their own amps, but the sound was from the Marshall Super Lead with Celestion speakers. I don't remember using a room mic on Billy's rig because we double tracked the rhythm, with the second track having the strings slightly out of tune." He puts in brackets, flat by a few cents. So yeah, that was his rig, and Pearly is referring to the Pearly Gates 59 Les Paul that Billy Gibbons of course owns, and so he used that guitar and some solid body Fenders. Probably a Telecaster, I'm guessing, and I read elsewhere that the amp was specifically a 1968 Marshall Super Lead, and according to the producer's email there, the cab was running Celestion speakers. As I always say though, this series is not about going out and buying an identical rig to recreate the tone with, as fun as that would be if money were no issue. It's about dialing in the tone using the gear that you already own, whether it's a modular, a plug-in, or a combo amp with a pedal board. As I said earlier, the gear I'm using today is my Line 6 HX Stomp XL with the J Rocket El Hombre Overdrive running into the front of it, and the guitar is my 2012 Gibson Les Paul Standard with Burstbucker Pro pickups. Literally all I'm running on my HX Stomp preset is the Deluxe Reverb amp and cab block. No effects, literally just that Fender amp and cab block. Now, there's a couple of reasons as to why I didn't pick a Marshall Plexi style amp, even though we know that that's what Billy Gibbons used. He used a Plexi, he used a Marshall Super Lead. One reason is that Fender tube combos, or at least Fender style combos, are the most commonly owned amps out there. Like, most backline amps are Fender Hot Rod Deluxe or Blues Juniors or Deluxe Reverbs, and most rehearsal studios in the world that you go to are going to have Fender tube combos as the guitar amps. So in my mind, I'm just thinking most of you watching this, if you own a tube amp, it's likely that it's some sort of Fender combo, be it a Blues Junior, Hot Rod Deluxe, or a Deluxe Reverb, not a Plexi half stack. The other reason is that this El Hombre Overdrive is clearly designed to replicate that Billy Gibbons Marshall Super Lead sound, regardless of what it's plugged into. A lot of the time when I see 3-knob overdrives, I always assume it's going to be some sort of Troop Screamer or Klon Centaur clone, but this to my ears is not like those pedals at all. It feels much more like an amp in a box overdrive, which is essentially an overdrive that, when used in front of an amp, responds in a way that makes it feel like you've added another channel to your amp. I have a few pedals like this, namely the Revival Drive Compact from Origin Effects, the Sur Eclipse, and the Carl Martin Plexi Ranger. All of those pedals feel like you've added another channel to your clean amp, and it's the same feeling with this El Hombre overdrive pedal from J-Rocket. Now, tip number 1 for dialing in this sound is to set your amp's EQ fairly bright. I've got the bass around 4, middle around 9, treble at 6, presence is between 7 and 8, the drive is set to 4, and the channel volume is at 8. So I've got a woody, bright, edge of breakup style tone without the overdrive engaged that sounds like this. That dry amp tone that you just heard doesn't sound like much, but when you add in an overdrive pedal in front of it, that's when the magic happens, and that EQ of the amp really starts to shine through. So let's add in the El Hombre. So how I've got the pedal set is the level is around 2 o'clock, the gain is between 9 and 10 o'clock, and the bite control is dimed. Now this bite control is really cool. The more you turn it up, the more mid-range and high-end bite you get. But that being said, when it's all the way down, it's actually still a very usable tone. I really hate it when pedals have controls that in their most extreme settings are just unusable, whether it's all the way up or all the way down. That's not the case with this bite control. As you'll hear, if I turn it all the way down, it still sounds great. There's just a bit less high-end bite. Personally, I like the way it sounds all the way up with the amp's EQ dialed in the way that I described earlier. If you're using an overdrive pedal with a tone control, then I would advise dialing in your amp's EQ with the overdrive pedal engaged and have everything set to noon. And then once the amp's EQ is set, then you can fine tune the amount of high end and gain using those controls on your overdrive pedal. And speaking of gain, like I said, the amp is set to edge of breakup, so it's already a little bit crunchy without the overdrive, but I'm only adding a little bit of gain from the El Hombre because this is a 70s Texas blues rock sound we're going for, and it does call for a fairly low gain overdriven tone. So if I turn the gain all the way up on the pedal, it is a nice tone, as you'll hear. So here's where it is currently, just set to like between 9 and 10 o'clock. And now if I turn it all the way up, that is still a nice tone, and it's good to have that additional gain as an option, but it's too much for what we're going for here with that early 70s Billy Gibbons sound. So that's EQ and gain covered. Tip number 2 is to play with a light touch. Billy Gibbons plays with a very light pick attack. One mistake I see a lot of guitar players and cover bands make when they play songs like La Grange is they'll do this. And perhaps mistake isn't the right word because that does sound somewhat good, but if you're truly chasing the Billy Gibbons sound, it's not heavy strumming with just the pick like I just demonstrated. It's a combination of pick and fingers with a very light touch. Even in his solos, it's still a very soft touch that he uses. there's something else he does in his lead playing that I would consider to be an essential part of his sound. And tip number 3 is all to do with that. It's using pinch harmonics. Not full-on squeals, but pinch harmonics that are light enough so that you can hear the actual note as well as the harmonic at the same time, like this. My fourth and final tip for chasing the early 70s ZZ Top guitar tone is to do what the producer said they did in those Tres Hombres recordings and double track the rhythm parts. Billy Gibbons is the only guitar player in the band, and the way he's able to make his one guitar sound so wide and thick in those recordings is by double tracking each rhythm part and panning them left and right. This is a very common recording practice for rhythm guitar parts. If you put on some headphones, I'll show you the difference that double tracking makes. Here's LaGrange with one guitar track panned in the center versus double tracked and panned left and right. Now, that's a studio trick, so how would you replicate that live? Well, I think the closest thing that you can do is to use a delay pedal with one repeat and set the delay time between 30 and 60 milliseconds. I've got one loaded up on my preset now, and the time is set to 39 milliseconds. The feedback is at 0, so I'm only getting one repeat, and then the mix is set to 43%. So without the delay, it sounds like this. And with the delay added in, that really subtle and fast delay just helps to thicken up the guitar sound. So that's what I would recommend if you're chasing that double track sound in a live setting. So those are my tips for chasing the early 70s Billy Gibbons tone. I hope that they were helpful, and if you're interested in purchasing the J-Rocket El Hombre Overdrive pedal, I'll have links in the description box beneath the video. This is actually the first J-Rocket pedal that I can say I own, but I have used their Archer, Icon and Dude pedals before, and I remember being blown away by them, and this one sounds killer as well, so nice work, J-Rocket. Who should I cover on the next episode of Iconic Tone? Let me know in the comments section. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more if you aren't subscribed already, and I will see you in the next one.